Alright, so I wanted to make a video in response to Monetary Theory Number 1 by Alex Merced. And I liked a lot of the things he said in the video. Disagreed with a few of them, although they're not large disagreements. It's just, I'm a really nitpicky person, I guess. And also I wanted to start contributing more to the YouTube community, so I figured this is an easy way to do it. Just look up other people's videos and gain inspiration from them and make response videos. Anyway, so of course, one of the things is that value is subjective. I'd agree with that in the Austrian school. You mentioned that part of a money's value is its intrinsic value. I have a problem with this wording, and the reason for that is that because value is subjective, it's not intrinsic to something. Something has intrinsic features, and those are the objective qualities of it. And I remember in my sales class we went over that and differentiating between features and benefits. So features are the objective things about a particular product, and the benefits is how the consumer generates value from it. And so basically that's the subjective part of it. It's its usefulness to the particular user. So for example, one person can use something to meet a certain end, and a different person might use the exact same thing but to satisfy a different end. But of course most people use money for the same stuff basically, and it turns out, empirically, that most things that are used as money have certain qualities to them, and people like that in their money. And so those things include, those features, those intrinsic qualities are durability, portability, and divisibility. So durability means it lasts a while, it's not going to go bad, so like you're saying, that's why bananas don't make a good money. Divisibility, you can make change. Nowadays you have different sorts of coins, and in the past when people didn't have as many coins and coining technology probably wasn't as advanced as it is today, people would just if they didn't have a coin, they would just have a piece of the metal of the commodity money, and then they'd cut it, or however they divide it, and they put it on a scale and say, okay, I need this much amount of whatever metal, and then put it on a scale to weigh it out, and there you go, you make the transaction. Of course today we have debit cards, makes it even much easier to have that, and so that's why debit cards are cool and why people have debit cards. What else? Portability, you can move it around, has a high value per unit weight, like gold, silver, copper, stuff like that. At least, relatively speaking. What else? Another thing is the network effect. Certain things benefit from the network effect, which is a positive feedback mechanism, and the way it works is that the more people use that thing, the more you as an individual benefit from also using it, because that becomes part of its usefulness. And money exhibits this quality, and another thing that exhibits this quality is Facebook. So the more people use a particular money, the more it makes sense for you to use that money, because that means the wider variety of things it'll trade for, and therefore the wider variety of things are available to you if you use that money, that currency. And just like on Facebook, the more people use Facebook, the more people you are able to communicate with on Facebook, and so the more it makes sense to use Facebook. Right? So if there was nobody on Facebook, it wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense to use it. Let's see. Yeah, so I like a lot of the things that were said in the video. I just don't see really the point in reinventing the wheel. I think Austrians and neoclassicals already have a lot of good stuff on monetary theory, and I think additions to it will be like elaborations or modifications and things like that. Alright, another thing you mentioned was purchasing power. I don't believe that necessarily is the one of these values that comes from a currency, and the reason for that is the unit of account, right? So if something has durability and portability and all that other stuff and usefulness, it becomes it, and people end up using it as a unit of account. And so the purchasing power of an individual unit of money doesn't really matter. Really what matters is the predictability and changes in its purchasing power. And I think maybe this also comes from Mises's regression theorem. Maybe not I'm not saying Mises said it because I'm not really familiar with a lot of his work. I've only had somewhat passing, familiarity with it, not a whole lot. But basically, his regression theorem, if I recall correctly, goes that first, money arises through barter, people start trading it, and then they develop expectations on what it can trade for in the future, and then that determines its purchasing power as well. And another thing is that if you're in a wage, earning a wage, right, and you develop a contract, doesn't really matter what the purchasing power of, say, currency A versus currency B is, if they're changing at the same rate and in the same direction, then it wouldn't really matter, right? So it would only matter when there's changes in the purchasing power. So if you're locking in your wage nominally at a certain level, but then the purchasing power of that currency is falling, dramatically over time or whatever, then obviously that's going to be a problem. And also purchasing power, I just want to say, is based on the usefulness to the consumer, so what they can trade it for, and other things, like I said, all of the other intrinsic features that it has will also be part of its purchasing power. Another thing is what it trades against. I wrote in my notes here, it's effective supply, meaning total spending. The reason I say effective supply is because you can have an increase in the money supply, but if it's not being spent, then it's not driving up prices because it's not bidding for other goods and resources in the economy. For example, we have inflation today, but it's not as high as a lot of people expected because the banks have a lot of excess reserves on deposit at the Federal Reserve, because there's so much risk out there. So we do have inflation, but it's not nearly as high as a lot of people were expecting, and that's because a lot of that money hasn't been spent. In the economics jargon, if you were to see the purchasing power, you have an aggregate demand, aggregate supply diagram, and then where they intersect, that's the price level. So for folks who like diagrams and who have had your mainstream neoclassical economics course, so it's like total spending chases total output, and then that determines the purchasing power. But it's not the purchasing power of an individual unit as a snapshot in time that really people will look at in terms of usefulness. They're going to look at how it's changing over time. So people, they see a currency that's falling faster than the other currencies, they're not going to want to get a contract that locks in their wage at a specific amount in that currency, because they're saying, no, why would I do that? It's falling faster than all of the rest. And I like to use the empirical example of Bitcoin, of having a non-backed money, your currency, coming into existence. This also is, again, just because it has usefulness to people, and the way, just more generally, I think economic theories, the more general they are, the better. Because the more specific something is, then the more likely it is to be merely a specific application of a more general theory. And so Bitcoin has usefulness to people, that's why they use it. They can trade for goods in a discrete way, and they can trade for things that they might not be able to get as easily if they don't use Bitcoin, right? And so that's why people use Bitcoin. So basically that's it. It's kind of like, notice that it's not really technical the way I'm saying it, but it's true. They're using it because they can get something out of it. People see, because value is subjective, people see that it satisfies some of their ends, therefore they use it. And I think that's basically all I wanted to say. Overall, I thought it was a really good video, and that's it.